Yay! Teambornitis! Unleash this book reviews. Bringing you new book reviews on contemporary literature, modern literature, old literature, genre fiction, literary fiction, kids books, magazines, literary magazines, poetry, comic books, whatever you guys want, whatever I want, that's what gets talked about here on Unleash This Book Reviews. And I just got back out of my closet because I was wearing a blue shirt, which doesn't work with green screens. You wanna know how I found out? Because every wall in my apartment is either yellow or blue. Scratch that. Was yellow or blue. Ta-da! Say hello to my new white wall, painted just for you, just for this channel, so we can talk about books and use green screen effects and not have fuzzy things back there. Now, one thing you might notice about this wall, check it out. Dry erase board. Paint. That's some special heavy-duty kind of paint. Now, I've heard this stuff doesn't erase as well as you'd like, so hopefully the notes I've jotted down here that you can't read, because I'm just like every English teacher you've had in high school where they scribble on the board and you can't make out what they're writing down. We'll see if it comes off. Not too sure. Anyways, today bringing you J.M. Barrie's Peter and Wendy, or Peter Pan and Wendy, or Peter Pan. It goes by a lot of different titles, and I know this isn't the literary fiction that you guys jump to my channel to come see, but bear with me. I promise there's some coming. I'll talk about that at the end of the video. And hey, sit back, relax, enjoy a fairy tale, because sometimes kids' books are even better than adult books. And the best fairy tales have stuff for kids and adults, including this one. Now, Peter and Wendy was published, it was first put on stage in 1904. It was then translated by J.M. Barrie into a novel form and published in 1911. It got a lot of acclaim. A lot of people liked it. J.M. Barrie would go on to write some sequels, which were never really as popular, and, you know, this is the one that's kind of lived on. Interesting little tidbit of information. Most books usually run on a 50-year copyright lifespan, which means after they've been published and been on the earth for 50 years, they then go into the public domain, meaning that you can use them and copy them and quote them, print them as you please. But Peter Pan here has kind of found a loophole, a little exception, and that's because when J.M. Barrie passed away, he wrote in his will that he wanted all income that came from the royalties of publishing this book to go to a hospital. And because I'm not good at remembering names and stuff, I wrote that hospital's name down. It's the Great Ormond Street Hospital in England. And ever since then, this hospital has been bringing in profits, and so they still are allowed to bring in profits. There's some complexities involved in there, but it's an interesting little fact. Now, this story, it's classic fairy tale stuff. It's great feel to the words. It's got that nostalgic, like, never grows old, always want to go back, wish things were still like this feel. Kind of like that. It's got that sense of urgency that, say, Winnie the Pooh stories have, whereas there's always an obstacle to hurdle over, but it's never too exciting or intense or life-threatening that you can't fall asleep at night, you know, sort of aimed at kids but relaxing for adults too. Yeah, it's got that type of a feel. Lots of adventures throughout the story, all culminating in the big fight with Hook. It's great fun stuff. Here's a little tidbit on Captain Hook that you may or may not know, depending on if you're a theater type person. Now, I'm not, and this kind of blew me away. You know, when this is performed on stage, that Captain Hook is played by the same actor that plays Wendy's father. Tell me there's not some Freudian psychology going on there in one way or another, right? The girl's dad in real life is also the person who hates the sort of boyfriend figure in the fantasy world. And don't tell me that Peter Pan doesn't play sort of like the fantasy boyfriend to Wendy, right? Peter Pan's sort of like the James Dean to Wendy in this situation. The bad boy, the guy that dad wouldn't like to see bringing back home. You know what I mean? Yeah. Another character I'd like to bring up that I find pretty interesting in this book, especially considering that Disney has completely twisted and changed her, is Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell comes off as a complete jerk in this book, and I would use swear words if I was a person who cursed in my videos, but I'm not, and so I'm not gonna, but I think you know what I'd call her here. She is a selfish, greedy person who doesn't want Peter Pan to be happy. She just wants Peter Pan to herself. She even goes so far as to try and kill Wendy. You probably know that from the Disney adaptation, and it happens in the story too. What I'm trying to say is all those Barbie dolls and made-for-TV, made-for-DVD release movies and nap-time blankets that little 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old girls use. Parents might want to try reading this book and see what type of character Tinkerbell really is before endorsing her to their children. You know, I don't know. Just something I kind of thought about. Let's take a look at the notebook here. Another thing I want to talk about, there's some adult themes in this story. They probably would go over most children's head, but a lot of random murdering and killing, and there's some curse words in the book and stuff like that. Just enough to keep people like you and me interested, but not too much that if you're a parent reading it to a child at bedtime, you can't sort of skip over right as you see it and kind of have it go unnoticed by the kids laying in bed. And that's exactly what this kind of book is great for. I'm looking forward to having kids someday and being able to read this to them in bed, because this is what a child's life is really like, you know, inhabiting that imaginary world where time doesn't exist. And that's one of my favorite characteristics about Peter Pan in this story, is that he is just like a kid when it comes to time. He has no trace of time. And I think that's best illustrated in the last chapter of this book. It's an epilogue that was attached by J.M. Barrie after the play had been released. He also added it to the play version, but it's not always included. It also wasn't included at the end of the Disney version of the film. It's not always included in a lot of versions of the film. But to me, it is the most meaningful and epic and touching and most important part of this entire story. And it really kind of surprises me that it's not discussed more, because the last chapter of this story is when Wendy and her brothers come home from Neverland and they grow up. And I'm telling you right now, I almost started crying reading this last chapter. I'm manly enough to admit that. Wendy starts getting older and older and older, and Peter Pan says that he's going to come back and visit yearly because Wendy's mother tells Wendy that she can go back to Neverland and tidy up his place and do spring cleaning on a yearly basis. But since Peter Pan has no idea what time is, no way to really track it, he misses years, and it breaks Wendy's heart. And he comes back, 3, 4 years later. He doesn't even realize that he's missed time. He just expects her to hop on board and go back to Neverland and help out. One point he misses a whole chunk of time, and when he comes back, she's an old woman. She's a mother now. And poor Peter Pan has to, turn on the light and be petrified at what happened to his childhood mother, and it breaks Wendy's heart, and it breaks his heart, and he's scared, and he flies away. Whew, man. Moving stuff. Luckily, it wraps up nicely. I'm not going to spoil the ending completely. I promise, though, that when you finish the book, you don't leave with that emotional heart tugging, but it really does pull on you, and I think the whole book really wouldn't be nearly as great in my head remembering it if it wasn't for that last chapter. Great stuff. Really cool story. J.M. Barrie wrote this story based off of a neighborhood friend's group of children, and he based the characters off those children. How great would it be to grow up as a child being told stories that revolved around you? I mean, we've all had great, I shouldn't say we all had, but a lot of us have had really cool grandparents and stuff like that, but I can't think of anything that would be having somebody come around and tell you fantastic stories like Peter Pan, based on you, based on yourself. Now, the sad part of the story is those children's parents were tragically passed away at a young age. I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but these kids were orphaned. And J.M. Barrie went and he adopted these kids. Tell me that's not heartwarming and touching. J.M. Barrie, very similar, it seems like, to Alice in Wonderland's author, whose name is escaping me right now. Crap. I'm going to remember it as soon as I cancel this. Whatever, they have as soon as I end this video, they have a very, very similar history, and it's just cool stuff, I recommend this, especially if you're looking for something a little bit lighter after some intense literary fiction. I mean, let's face it, we can't all be reading Moby Dicks after Moby Dicks, Sometimes you need to take off a week or two to read something new, Very soon, getting back on track. Since I've been leaving you guys without videos for a while, I've been catching up on some reading so I can pump some videos out for you. One, I wrote down the pronunciation for me here, Don Da Lil Lo. Apparently there's more than a few pronunciations, but that's the one I'm going for. Don DeLillo's White Noise. Been reading it a little bit more than halfway through. I love it. I think you guys are going to love it, and I'm going to get into why I love it very soon. But what I have also finished, and what's probably going to come first, is a literary magazine that I have... I can't even express how much I've fallen in love with this. It's called The Newer York. It's pint-sized. It's like this big, you know. I don't know if you're familiar with literary magazines, but a lot of them bore me. You know, they're basically books, collections of books that come out that have short stories and poems and art and stuff like that all collected in it. But it always, I've read dozens of them, and they always come across like they're meant for, say, I don't know, 40, 50, 60-year-olds. It's just never clicked with me, and I don't feel like they'd really click with you, and that's why I've never really talked to you about them. But this one, The Newer York, whew, knocked me off my feet. Seriously, can't wait to tell you about that. That's coming up soon. A lot of good stuff, alright? I'm going to get to trying to erase this whiteboard. Hopefully it all comes off, and I will be seeing you very soon. Don't forget to subscribe if you like my channel. Subscriptions mean a lot because, believe it or not, I actually make like 3 cents off of every view and subscription that comes my way. So, you know, it helps pay the bills minimally, but it does. Alright? Follow me on Twitter at unleash_this, and I'll be talking to you soon. Alright? Take care of yourself, guys. See ya.